I had to go to Germany and interview the survivors of the U-boat to put the pieces together.
Again, David Fox, who directs the Immortal Chaplains Foundation.
There were about 6 of them still alive, so I was able to interview 3 of them, including the first officer of the submarine, who was the last surviving officer, and also the chief munitions, Unteroffizier. He handled the torpedoes. He actually had his hand on the torpedo that sank the Dorchester, and interviewed him. And that was so moving to go to Germany and say, hello, you've never met me, but you killed my uncle 55 years ago, or whatever it was.
How did he respond to meeting you?
They were cautious at first, but when I said, I'm coming not to blame you, but to me that there are 2 sides of the story.
I think that must have been astonishing for these German veterans because they did lose the war, and they are held responsible. The German people in general are held responsible for such horrendous crimes. They're not often offered forgiveness.
That's right, and I felt that just as the chaplains reached out to each other, I said I felt that as a representative of the families of the chaplains, I wanted to reach out to them because I felt that the chaplains would have forgiven them, and therefore my going said that.
I'm Krista Tippett, and this is Speaking of Faith, with a program to commemorate Memorial Day. My guest, David Fox, has shared the informal interviews he conducted with the surviving veterans of the troopship Dorchester, on which nearly 700 American soldiers died off the coast of Greenland in 1943. David Fox has also made contact with the veterans of the German submarine that torpedoed them, and they, like the American soldiers who witnessed the event, have been profoundly affected by the legacy of 4 chaplains of different faiths who linked arms and went down together with their ship. In 1997, David Fox created the Immortal Chaplains Foundation in Minnesota. The foundation awards an international prize for humanity to recognize acts of faith and reconciliation which counterbalance more familiar images in our world of violence.
The first prize was given posthumously to a man on board one of those Coast Guard cutters, the Comanche. His name was Charles W. David, and he was a black man, and he was a big man. He was from New York City. And when that ship, the Dorchester, went down, he went over the side of the Comanche and pulled up white men in 36 degrees temperature water. Sometimes, they said, 2 at a time. And Charles W. David died of exposure, of pneumonia, because he did that.
After saving all those lives.
After saving those lives. Dick Swanson, who was his comrade on board, came and accepted the award in his place. He was his shipmate. Dick is white. Charles was black.
And again, we're talking 1943.
1943.
Yeah.
And when that ship went into the port in St. John's, Newfoundland, they couldn't go to the same place together. They couldn't go into the same club. They couldn't go do things together. They were segregated. And yet he did that with his life. So that was the first prize. And then the second one was to a young girl, a young American girl from California, Amy Beale, who went to South Africa and was stoned to death. She went there to fight apartheid, and ironically was bringing a black friend back to their home in the Soweto neighborhoods. And she was stoned to death by a group of black people. And her mother and father came from California to accept that award, and it was Archbishop Desmond Tutu who presented the award. And that meant a great deal to him.
I remember that story clearly. It was so stunning that they also went and testified at the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, right?
Exactly. And asked that the killers of Amy be forgiven.
You also, I believe, arranged for some of the German sub-veterans to meet. Did they meet the veterans
Quite.
Of the Dorchester?
Yes. When Rosalie, the rabbi's daughter, and I, we started to share how important it would be to keep the story alive, but also to tell the story of others who have done this. So I contacted Archbishop Desmond Tutu in South Africa, and I asked him if he would be a part of this. And it was such a great thing for him to come here and participate in our first event in Minneapolis.
Some of us might preach eloquent sermons about laying down one's life. They lived out their sermons. Isn't that a wonderful sentence, that? They lived out their sermons by dying. Jesus said, unless a grain of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains barren. It remains alone. If it dies, it brings forth abundantly. Have we not here, in the saga of these four wonderful men, an extraordinary illustration of both of these sayings? They should have disappeared from the face of the earth as they did physically, as they went down into the icy cold waters of the Atlantic. But isn't it extraordinary that now the opposite has happened? That instead of oblivion and forgetfulness, they receive glory and honor. For greater love than this has no one, that a person should lay down their life for their friends.
Archbishop Desmond Tutu preaching at the first award ceremony of the Immortal Chaplains Prize for Humanity in Minneapolis in 1998. The following year, the prize recipients included Paul Rusesabagini, a Rwandan hotel manager who sheltered 1,000 people of the Tutsi tribe, while 800,000 others were slaughtered by his own Hutu tribesmen. David Fox counts as one of his great memories an unsolicited visit he received after that award from a later Prime Minister of Rwanda. It turned out that he was one of the people Paul Rusesabagini kept alive in his hotel. David Fox.
This is something that is beyond my anticipation,
yes,
my expectations. I had no idea that we would touch people in this way.
Well, you know, there's something in this story about ripple effects and about
Exactly.
the larger unseen possibilities in a moment. And it doesn't take the tragedy away, but there was so much reconciliation and compassion and goodness that was possible to come out of that over time. And it's true of every other story you've told me, all of your other recipients of the award.
Right. And I have to mention one other thing, too. I was scheduled to go and talk to a school, a high school, on a day in April that was the day after the Columbine, Colorado massacre. I got a letter from the principal the next week, and he said, after you spoke to the students on that day, he said, the following assembly, students started to get up and publicly apologize to people that they had pushed out and made to feel less than themselves. And he said it was that the combination of that story of what the chaplains did and the catharsis of Columbine, the recognition of not having compassion, excluding people, pushing people apart. He said that story that you told has an amazing power to it. So that's why we feel it's important to keep this alive.
I think that simple act, simple, but it was great, has changed my life. I try to do more for people. I don't worry about me so much. I'm doing something for somebody else.